Hey guys, tonight we drift towards something soft and strange. Imagine a coral city so elusive it disappears whenever someone dares to remember its name. Right now, you're gliding over moonlit water in a boat made from tide memories. Yes, memories stored in the current like jellyfish in bottles. The oars don't splash, they whisper. The air smells like salt and distant music, the kind that sounds like it was written by someone who only dreamed of pianos. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this place in real life. Between the sentient sea foam, the tides that forget themselves mid-ripple, and the occasional gravity-optional clamshell taxi, you'd be lucky to get past customs. But lucky for you, this is just a bedtime story, and you're fully authorized to explore in your comfiest pajamas. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how far this dream travels. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't quite remember boarding this boat. One moment you were dozing on your couch, and the next you were reclining in a vessel carved from polished driftwood, with cushions that smell faintly of forgotten birthdays and citrus peel. It's piloted by no one, or maybe by the boat itself. Either way, it seems to know where you're going better than you do. Around you, the water is strangely warm, even though the air has that gentle bite of a pre-dawn breeze. On your left, distant shapes loom under the waves, columns, trees, entire buildings. They flicker like memories recalled too quickly. And then you see it, the coral city. It doesn't rise from the water. It drifts there, as if the ocean merely chose to remember it for now. Structures that curve like conch shells, balconies shaped like petals, walkways of soft pink stone that glow faintly in the night like embers from a shy volcano. Fish drift through the alleys like they're browsing old bookstores. The air is filled with the scent of pearl dust and wet limestone, and beneath it, a whisper. Don't say its name. You try to think of what the city might be called, but the moment you do, your brain slides away from the thought, like a dream you forgot before breakfast. Every time you get close to forming the word, a seabird cries overhead or a breeze rearranges your thinking. There's an old tale that cities can grow from longing, that if enough people forget something at the same time, a name, a place, a feeling, sometimes the forgetting pools together into form. This city feels like that. A collective lapse, a geographical sigh. As your boat coasts into the harbor, which isn't really a harbor but more like an opening between coral fingers, the boat slows without being asked. The sea here is eerily flat. The surface holds your reflection a beat too long. You look into it and see a version of yourself that might have taken the other job, married someone else, moved to that town you never visited. You step onto a path lined with shells that chirp quietly when stepped on, like they're trying not to wake someone. The buildings nearby lean slightly as if they're listening in. Each one glows faintly from within. No wires, no candles, just a soft, rhythmic pulse. Some say it's the coral breathing, others believe the structures remember their original inhabitants and mimic their heartbeats. Here's a real-world fun fact. Corals aren't rocks, they're alive, tiny animals called polyps, living in large colonies that build reefs over centuries. What's less widely discussed is that certain coral formations can resonate like tuning forks when touched. One scientist swears he heard a low humming tone while diving near a deepwater reef off Papua New Guinea, but the sound never appeared on recording. Somewhere in this city you hear that hum now. It seems to pull you forward. As you walk, you notice the street signs change languages every few seconds. One moment it's elegant calligraphy, the next an alphabet made of tiny pictograms shaped like sea creatures. Then just dots, 3 in a row, then 2, then a spiral. You wonder if they spell something you're supposed to forget, or something you're trying to remember. A soft bell rings in the distance. You instinctively look up and see a tower near the water's edge. You could swear it wasn't there a moment ago. A gull lands on its roof and nods as if confirming your suspicion. Yes, you're being watched, but only gently. You pass a fountain filled not with water, but shimmering sand that flows like liquid. Floating above it, little orbs of light flicker in and out of sight. They seem harmless, but you feel like they know your middle name. One glides close to your cheek. It smells like a memory of summer. You think of asking someone what this place is called, but there's no one around. The buildings stretch and sway slightly, not unlike kelp, as if the city itself isn't fixed in place but riding some underwater current of time. There's a softness here, a willingness to exist only when no one demands it to. You take a deep breath and realize you've already forgotten what day it is. Good. You start down a path that wasn't there before. Not quite. The street beneath your feet is made of smooth coral tiles, each one a different shade of mauve, like a field of muted seashells arranged by someone who dreams in gradients. The route curves left, then right, then doubles back lazily, as if it's unsure whether you're ready to arrive anywhere just yet. As you walk, you realize the streets shift slightly behind you. You don't hear them move, there's no grinding, no sliding. But when you glance back, the path has redrawn itself into a soft zigzag where it was straight before. A helpful kind of disorientation, the kind that invites you to stop caring where you're going. It's a known fact that some ancient cities, like those in the desert labyrinths of the Berbers, were intentionally built with twisting paths, not just for defense, but to confuse invading spirits. You start to wonder if this coral city, with its gentle shuffles and ever-morphing alleys, might be trying to keep out something too curious, or someone too certain. The scent of salt grows stronger, mixed now with a trace of saffron and petrichor. You pass a tree that looks like it's made entirely from bone-white coral. Those soft green vines have wrapped themselves around its branches, blooming with flowers shaped like small bells. One of them rings softly when you step near. It smells like a childhood you don't quite recognize. A short staircase appears ahead. You don't remember climbing down to reach this level, but the stairs seem politely insistent. Each step gives slightly under your foot, like memory foam molded from compressed fog. At the top, the city opens wide. The buildings here are taller, more ornamental. Balconies spiral outward like conch horns, and every window is shaped differently, as if they were each designed for someone with a unique way of seeing. One is a triangle, one a perfect circle. Another is just a series of slits that seem to blink slowly in the afternoon shade. No one else is walking these streets, though you feel a presence. Or maybe several. You start to notice little signs of lives recently lived. A shawl draped over a carved bench, a cup of tea still warm beside a fountain, faint laughter echoing from nowhere specific. The surrealism is tender here, not jarring. Like a Dali painting after it's had a good nap. You stop to rest beneath an awning woven from translucent seaweed and thin glass rods. They sway together gently in the breeze, playing a faint melody. Not quite music, more like a half-remembered lullaby sung to a pearl. And then the street ahead bends in a way that's geometrically inconvenient. It curves sharply upward, forming an arc that should be impossible without a support structure. But here it is, paved in sand-glass tiles, winding like a ribbon into the air. You take a step, and gravity decides to play along. The incline feels flat beneath your feet. Your shadow trails behind, then to the left, then above you. At the top of the arc, there's a round platform with a low wall. You lean on it, looking out. The city rolls gently below, not in chaos, but in calm, deliberate rearrangement. You see plazas shift, stairs unfold. A bridge seems to slink away like a sleeping cat, repositioning in a sunbeam. The whole place breathes. Do you feel rearranged? Someone whispers. Not a voice near you, but inside you, like an echo from an unread letter. You don't respond. You don't have to. You descend from the arc path into a lane that smells like baked stone, and orange blossom. On the wall to your left, a tiled mural spells out a poem in spiral script you don't recognize. Still, you somehow know the last line means, even the sea forgets where it ends sometimes. A cat appears around the corner. Its fur is made of shadow and sea salt, and it regards you with heavy patience. It walks just ahead of you, occasionally glancing back as if to check whether you're keeping up, not out of concern, more out of contract. The cat leads you through a series of intersections that were definitely not there 5 minutes ago. You pass an archway carved with thousands of tiny dots. They shimmer as you walk by, and for just a moment you hear a chorus of sighs in perfect harmony. Then you're alone again. No cat, no sighs, just you, a hallway of lavender light, and the unsettling thought that maybe you've never been anywhere real before, or perhaps you're just now starting to be. You catch a scent you can't name. Something between old books and morning fog. It makes you think of a time you almost made a different decision. The moment passes. So does the path beneath your feet, subtly adjusting like it's giving you another chance. Another opportunity not to remember what you came here to find. Eventually, the shifting streets settle. Not permanently, just long enough for you to catch your breath. You arrive at what appears to be the quietest building in the quietest district of the Coral City. It leans slightly to one side, as if caught mid-thought, and its front door is wide open but not in a welcoming way, more like it forgot how to be closed. Above the doorway, a small carving of an eye stares not at you but through you. Around it, in coral script too smooth to be chiseled by hand, is a phrase you intuitively translate as, "Here, the unfinished rests gently." Inside it smells like parchment, citrus peel, and something faintly like rain on old clay. The ceiling is high and vaulted with shimmering coral beams, and the air hums with the ambient sound of breathing paper. Welcome to the archive of half-kept promises. No one greets you, but you feel observed, kindly, in a librarian who walks silently kind of way. There are no visible books. Instead, the walls are lined with rows upon rows of glass jars. Some are large enough to hold a pillow, others no bigger than a thimble. Inside each, a faint swirl of light moves lazily, like fog caught in a sigh. Each jar is labeled with a phrase written in watery ink. You read a few as you walk past. "I'll write you when I settle in." "Let's meet when the cherry trees bloom." "I'll call as soon as I land." A strange but true note. In ancient Mesopotamia, scribes used clay tablets not only for contracts and laws, but for personal vows, some of which were intentionally left incomplete, as a way to symbolically keep the promise open. This place seems to operate on a similar principle. A library for what almost was. You approach one jar at random. Its glow intensifies slightly when you touch it. The label reads, "And if I ever find the courage, I'll tell you." Inside, a puff of golden mist spins in a lazy circle before resolving into the faint scent of lavender and wood smoke. You feel a pang. Not quite regret. More like recognition. Someone, somewhere, meant it. A narrow corridor branches off to the right. You follow it, and the jars grow stranger. Some hold not light, but sound. One contains a barely audible giggle. Another whispers a lullaby that sounds suspiciously like your grandmother humming behind a closed door. One pulses with a silence so perfect, your ears ring when you lean in. At the end of the corridor, you find a room with a domed ceiling made entirely of mirrored coral. It reflects not your face, but your posture, your emotional stance, if such a thing can be mirrored. You look hunched with expectation, caught in the act of waiting for something long gone. On a pedestal in the center of the room sits a box with no lid. Inside is a piece of folded paper, slightly translucent. As you lean over it, the words shift into focus, but not all at once. Each line appears only as you forget the last one. You meant to write. You meant to ask. You meant to say it mattered. The note ends there, and a small wisp of air curls up from the page as though something exhaled and then ceased. A faint laugh, distant and delicate, echoes through the archive. You turn, expecting to see someone, but there's no one. Just a trail of tiny footprints made from condensation leading back toward the entrance, child-sized, barefoot. You follow them because of course you do. Back in the main gallery, something has changed. One of the walls has retracted, revealing a spiral staircase leading downward. It glows with the soft blue of bioluminescence, the kind deep-sea creatures use to lure or soothe. You descend slowly. The lower level contains fewer jars. These are older, dustier, some nearly opaque with forgotten years. Their labels are in dead languages or mere symbols. One is labeled simply with an ellipsis, another with the outline of a mouth. You try to read them, but your mind gently drifts instead. At the center of this chamber is a coral throne, cracked and empty. Surrounding it are 7 jars, each hovering slightly above its pedestal. A small sign reads, "Reserved for promises too soft to keep, too sweet to break." You wonder if you've made a few like that, the kind you didn't even know, counted. In one jar, a swirl of purple mist briefly takes the shape of a pair of hands, reaching out, then folding inward. Another jar spins so fast it hums. Another stays absolutely still. You don't dare touch these. At the far corner of the room, tucked behind a curtain of sea silk, you find a simple desk. Upon it lies a blank sheet of coral paper and a pen made of feather and shell. No sign instructs you, but you know exactly what it's for. You sit. The moment your fingers touch the pen, a sentence begins forming on the page, not from ink, but from warmth, as though your intent burns gently into the surface. I promise to remember, but only while I forget. You don't recall deciding to write that, but it feels right. You place the paper in the small slot marked New Submission, and hear a quiet chime, like wind moving through a bottle left on a windowsill. The paper vanishes. As you stand, the staircase behind you shifts. It doesn't close, it moves. The walls ripple with faint coral light, and the city above reorients itself. Streets folding like a blooming flower, repositioning. The archive of half-kept promises remains behind you, quiet and content. You exit into a completely different plaza than the one you entered from. A fountain trickles somewhere. You hear the clink of porcelain and the hush of soft voices. Someone, somewhere, has just promised something. You walk toward it, pulled by the comforting clink of porcelain and the fragrant steam curling into the air. Jasmine, sea fennel, maybe a little fig leaf. There are tables scattered in no discernible pattern. Some are occupied by people you can't quite see directly, only in the corners of your vision. Soft shapes talking in voices like warm wind through reeds. A figure waves you over. Their face is partially hidden by a wide-brimmed hat woven from something like silver reeds. When they pour your tea, it steams upward in delicate spirals that rearrange themselves into tiny maps before dissolving. No introduction is offered, none needed. You are now taking tea with one of the cartographers of elsewhere. The cup is warm in your hand and shaped like a scallop shell. When you sip, the taste is nostalgic, though for what exactly is unclear. Maybe a goodbye that ended up being a beginning. Maybe a place you never visited but somehow miss. You glance at the figure again. They're unrolling a scroll across the table, several meters long, covered in ink that shimmers like fish scales. The map is not flat. It pulses slightly with depth, as though inviting you to dive. This is the known edge, they gesture, tracing a fluid, rippling coastline. And here, they tap a patch of blankness. Is you, for now. The cartographer offers you a tool, a compass with no needle. just a softly glowing pearl that dims and brightens depending on where you point it. You try a few directions. When you aim it toward the pavilion's entrance, it flickers out entirely. When you point it at the cartographer, it glows warm and steady like a satisfied cat. Across the plaza, a group of robed figures are unfolding an enormous map onto the ground. The parchment spills over stones, over benches, even up onto walls. It's covered in three-dimensional ink. Rivers rise like ridges, forests made of real moss, and cities rendered as delicate carvings. The cartographers are updating the world in real time. One of them uses a brush made from a bird's feather to paint a soft blue river across the ground. As they do, the air around the mark grows cooler and begins to smell like snowmelt and eucalyptus. "There's a theory," your cartographer murmurs, finally using their voice now, low, soft, with a slight accent that might belong to a place that never needed names. That maps make the world more real, but only if you never finish them. They point to a small corner of the scroll where a section labeled "The Coral City, Do Not Name" has been repeatedly scratched out, redrawn, and blurred. No two versions match. The city exists differently on every copy. It resists memory, they say. That's why it vanishes. And suddenly you understand, the city doesn't disappear when remembered, it disappears when remembered wrong. When mapped too rigidly, when claimed, when filed under something too neat. Names shrink things, and this city hates to be reduced. You sip your tea again, and the flavor has changed. It now tastes like a secret you once told a tree. The cartographer nods approvingly. They roll up the map and pass it to you, though it's much too long to carry. Yet it folds neatly into your pocket, warm and pulsing slightly like a tiny, calm animal. A bell rings from somewhere. Not loud. Just enough to suggest a shift in tone. Their seat vanishes behind them like a sigh into velvet. You look down and find that your own has become a small, folded boat, origami coral, etched with directions that make no linear sense. "Keep walking," they say, "until the road forgets your shoes." You nod, because that feels like the only appropriate response. As you leave the pavilion, you pass a sign carved in sea glass. All maps end in wonder if you stop early enough. You step onto a bridge that wasn't there before. It stretches over nothing, a void filled with slow-turning clouds and the soft sound of lullabies sung in languages you only know while dreaming. Each plank beneath your feet names a place you've almost been. The waiting meadow, the library of shared silences, that rooftop in Lisbon where you almost kissed her. The last board you step on simply says "now." The bridge ends not in another street, but in a corridor carved from fossilized music. You recognize the feeling more than the tune. And behind you, the tea pavilion slowly folds itself closed, sails sighing downward like petals at dusk. The map pulses in your pocket, still incomplete, just the way it prefers to be. You emerge from the music stone corridor into a glade, or what counts as a glade, in the Coral City. No trees here, not exactly, just tall, spiraling coral stalks shaped like tuning forks and soft chandeliers of sea glass leaves. Above you, wind chimes ring on their own accord, even though there is no wind. The air is still and thick with the smell of distant salt and something faintly metallic, like memory oxidizing in real time. The space feels sacred, but not religious. More like the kind of hush you'd find in a cathedral that forgot what it was praying for. Beneath a canopy of vines and mirrored driftwood, you find a circular platform lined with woven kelp. At its center lies something, or someone, sleeping. The coral sleeper. She is massive and motionless, curled slightly on her side like a figure carved into a tomb. Her body is made entirely of coral, but somehow flexible, like it's still growing. Hair like sea thread falls across her shoulders, and her breathing is almost imperceptible. But breathing, she is. The rise and fall of her chest is synced to the tolling of the invisible bells overhead. Each breath, one chime, each chime, a pulse through the whole city. A scholar might tell you about the hypnos figures of ancient Greece, often depicted as winged young men bringing sleep with a touch. But here, the coral sleeper is not a bringer of sleep. She is the sleep. The city's ongoing dream. Its rhythm, its slowness, its refusal to be pinned down. Next to her, etched into the platform in soft spirals, are phrases in a dozen scripts. Do not wake her, unless you have forgotten why you came, or unless the bells stop ringing. They haven't stopped, not yet. Still, your presence seems to disturb something, not alarm but curiosity. One of the sleeper's fingers twitches ever so slightly, and a tiny coral crab scuttles from her palm, clicking softly. It carries in its claws a slip of ribboned parchment, which it drops at your feet before disappearing under the folds of the sleeper's coral cloak. You pick it up. The note reads, "You once had a dream of bells underwater. This is not it, but it rhymes." You look around. The glade remains hushed, but the coral stalks are subtly vibrating now, as if they remember the sea even here, on land, in this city that shouldn't exist. You sit on the edge of the platform. There's a small basin of water beside you, reflecting not your face, but a series of images, a school desk, an unfinished to-do list, a phone call you didn't return. Then it blurs, revealing instead a slow-motion loop of you sleeping, now, here, in this city. How meta. In the distance, something chimes out of sync. Just once. You glance upward. One of the chimes, larger than the rest, has begun to tremble. A soft note spills from it like honey from a cracked jar. As it drips, the coral sleeper's eyelids twitch, just once, then fall still again. You wonder if she dreams? Maybe the coral city is her dream? Maybe you are. There's a fringe theory, an odd one, admittedly, that all cities have sleepers, personified dream beings that hold the memory and emotional core of a place. Supposedly, when a city is forgotten, its sleeper dissolves into wind or dust or just a story someone barely recalls. All very scholarly, all very unresolved. You're sitting beside one now and you still aren't sure what she is. Your fingers drift toward the sleeping form, and the bells above hum low in warning. Not a threat, just a reminder. Don't wake her. So instead, you hum a simple melody you half remember from childhood. Maybe it was on a mobile above your crib. Maybe someone whistled it to distract you from a scraped knee. Whatever it is, the coral sleeper exhales deeply, and the sound shifts the whole plaza. Coral stalks sway in a breeze that isn't real. Shadows reverse direction. Time forgets itself for a few seconds, and then settles again. A small door appears in the coral just beyond the platform, glowing slightly. The shape of it makes no architectural sense. Too round, too soft. You walk toward it. It opens at your touch, revealing a staircase spiraling downward, dimly lit with blue moss. Above you, the bells ring again, this time in harmony. The sleeper returns to her silence. As you descend, the sound fades, replaced by something stranger. A rhythmic knocking, almost like a heartbeat. You can't tell if it's in the walls or in your chest. Each step downward feels less physical and more like a thought you're choosing to continue. The staircase ends in a circular chamber. The walls here are inscribed not with coral, but with pressed petals, flowers fossilized mid-bloom, each one containing an entire phrase in scent. Regret touched lightly. Joy deferred, not denied. Love shaped like a question mark. You breathe in deeply and your knees go a little soft. Not unpleasantly. More like the moment before sleep, when you lose track of where your body ends and the mattress begins. A voice, not quite a whisper, says, "You've been here before, just not while awake." And with that, the wall in front of you ripples outward and becomes a screen, not for images, but for feelings. One by one, it shows you versions of yourself, joyful, worried, kind of smug at one point. Why were you wearing that shirt? And then, your eyes closed, leaning against a window, watching this city pass you by on the edge of sleep. It's a feedback loop. You dreamed the city while dreaming of dreaming it. The coral sleeper keeps the rhythm. The bells ring to keep her asleep. And the only reason the city remains is because you haven't tried to hold it too tightly. You step forward and place a hand on the wall. It sighs and dissolves, revealing another corridor. This one lined with soft lamplight and hanging keys. Somewhere in the city above, the bells toll once more. She dreams on. You take your first step into the corridor of keys and immediately the air changes. It grows denser, softer somehow, like walking into the hush of a snow-covered cathedral or the moment just after a page turns in a very old book. The ceiling curves low, made of soft sandstone veined with glowing threads. The walls are smooth and cool to the touch, but it's the keys, oh, the keys, that hold your attention. They dangle from invisible strings, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one different. Some are ancient, rusted things with teeth like musical notes. Others are delicate, made of crystal or glass, spinning slowly in place like ballerinas on invisible stages. None of them open a door, not in the way you're used to. Instead, each key opens a memory. You pick one at random. It's small and brass and slightly warm in your hand. When you turn it gently in the air, not fitting it into anything, just turning, you're suddenly overwhelmed with the scent of sun-warmed paper and chalk dust. A classroom. You blink and the memory fades, leaving a bitter-sweet warmth in your chest and a slight pressure behind your eyes. Instead, a laugh, soft and low and not entirely human. The kind of laugh you'd hear from a book that finally got to tell its favorite joke. The coral key dissolves in your hand, becoming a wisp of pink mist. The wall beside you ripples and reveals a line of script that glows briefly before vanishing. Some keys are not meant for locks, some are meant for letting go. A bell rings, muffled and distant. You can't tell if it's above ground or just in your mind. Further ahead, a bench appears beneath a canopy of hanging lamps. On the bench sits a figure made of glass and shadow, reading a book you recognize immediately. Your journal. The one you never finished. The one that still smells faintly of citrus and rainy sidewalks. The figure looks up but doesn't speak. Instead, they gesture for you to sit beside them. You do. They close the journal and hand it to you. It's heavier than it should be. When you open it, the pages are filled with tiny keys, pressed into the paper like dried flowers. Each key has a caption, "The lie you believed to stay kind." A friend you forgot to miss. You look at the figure beside you. They nod slowly. Then they dissolve, like fog when the sun gets serious. You carry the journal with you as you continue walking. The corridor begins to narrow slightly and the keys thin out. Now they hang lower, close enough to your face that you must duck or weave between them. It becomes a kind of dance, slow, almost reverent. Like the city is testing your ability to move gently through fragile thoughts. One key brushes your cheek and you remember vividly being 6 years old and trying to teach a cat to read. You'd been utterly convinced it understood vowels but was just playing coy. The memory is warm and absurd and somehow reassuring. The key flickers, then vanishes. The Coral City seems to have taken that concept literally, or maybe metaphorically. At this point, it's hard to tell the difference. Another bell rings. This one is closer. You arrive at a large archway. No door, just space. Above it, a final key, enormous and glowing faintly, is suspended mid-air. This one looks almost alive, breathing in slow pulses of lavender light. You reach up, and it lowers itself toward your hand. This key doesn't open a door, it is the door. And you are the keyhole. The moment stretches. You feel something click, not physically, but deep inside. Something old and quiet and reluctant slides open. You step forward through the arch. There is no more corridor, only silence, and then water. Not rushing or dramatic, just a slow rising shimmer, like your thoughts have become submerged. You're walking underwater now, but you're not wet. Schools of translucent fish drift by, trailing threads of light. One of them tips its head politely before continuing on. A sleepy octopus wearing a monocle waves from a coral outcropping, then resumes reading its newspaper, which is blank. And there it is. The coral city as it once was, unfolding slowly before you, no longer hiding, because for this moment you're not trying to hold it. You're simply moving with it. The underwater path ahead is not marked, yet somehow you know where to go. The current seems to understand your pace, adjusting itself so that your hair doesn't drift too wildly and your thoughts stay gently aligned. It's like being inside a perfectly calibrated daydream, complete with ambient bubbles and bioluminescent sea lilies that blink in slow Morse code. You pass a street of closed shops, each with hand-painted signs in languages you've never learned but somehow recognize. One shop sells glass umbrellas that open inward. Another rents laughter on vinyl. A third, possibly illegal, advertises brief encounters with alternate timelines. Tempting, but the current keeps you moving. And then, quite naturally, you arrive at a plaza with no center. It loops on itself like a Mobius strip. In the middle, sitting cross-legged on a stone platform shaped like a folded map, is the cartographer. He is older than the city and younger than your next dream. He wears robes patterned with topographical lines that shift slowly, mapping places even as they vanish. His beard is short, but it loops in spirals like a fingerprint made of fog. He sees you and smiles without surprise. "Still forgetting the name, are you?" he says. His voice is gravel, wrapped in velvet. "Good. That means it's still safe." You sit beside him. Not because he invites you, he doesn't have to, but because this is clearly what happens now. At your feet, spread out like a picnic blanket, is a map of the Coral City, or rather what remains of it. The buildings are drawn in watercolor. Some are smudged. Others appear to be scribbled out entirely. You notice small annotations along the edges. Remembered by a poet in 1903, faded by morning. Briefly reappeared during a nap in a dentist's waiting room. Lost again after being mentioned in a crossword clue. You raise an eyebrow. It really disappears when people say the name out loud. He nods solemnly. Or even when they almost say it. The city's shy like that. It doesn't want to be held, only visited. There's actually a historical precedent for this, though you wouldn't bring it up now, the mood's too gentle. But back in the 5th century, a philosopher wrote of a city of soft forgetting, a place said to exist between waking and sleep, reachable only by accident or by certain types of longing. Most dismissed it as metaphor, others swore they'd been there after eating too much cheese. The cartographer, clearly, is more than metaphor. He dips his fingers into a bowl of ink that isn't really ink. It moves too much, like cloud shadow, and touches a blank corner of the map. A new structure begins to emerge, a little crooked house with stairs on the outside, a swing with no tree, a window that blinks. "That one showed up last week," he murmurs. "Someone in Finland dreamed of their grandmother's laugh and accidentally remembered the alley behind her bakery. The city liked it, adopted the memory." You watch the house solidify, then fade slightly, as if unsure whether to stay. "But why map it," you ask, "if it keeps disappearing?" He chuckles, and the ink in the bowl ripples. Because that's the whole point. I don't map the city to find it. I map it to miss it correctly. You tilt your head. Miss it correctly? Yes, he says. Some places aren't meant to be returned to, but they deserve to be remembered in the right shape. A shoal of silver fish passes overhead, casting slow shadows that resemble handwriting. The cartographer shows you another section of the map. It's a spiral, drawn over itself again and again, until the ink pools in the center like an iris. This, he says, tapping the middle, is where you were yesterday. But I only got here tonight, he shrugs. Time's a bit soft here. You might have dreamed ahead of yourself. Happens. On the map, the spiral pulses faintly. You realize it's not a location. It's a memory loop, a day you half recalled and then forgot, one that got caught on the city's edge like driftwood. There's a fringe theory that human memory isn't stored in the brain at all, but in external structures, buildings, sounds, even cities. That remembering is just us, brushing up against where we left things. Maybe the Coral City is one of those structures, a collective soft archive for the things we let go of too kindly to forget entirely. You ask him, "How did you get here?" He smiles, eyes twinkling. Got lost in a footnote. Never found the way out. He gestures toward a stack of maps behind him. Some are rolled, others folded into cranes, boats, or something more complicated. I stay here so others have a shape to follow, even if it keeps shifting. You notice a detail. Each of the cartographer's fingers has a different fingerprint, tiny ridges shaped like concentric city plans. One is clearly a labyrinth, another looks like a metro line spiraling into the sea. He hands you a small slip of translucent paper. It's a piece of the map, torn deliberately. On it, a single phrase. Wherever you go, leave a little not knowing. You fold the map piece and tuck it into your pocket. Or maybe your sleeve. Or maybe the city tucks it into you. You rise. The cartographer returns to his ink and sighs, content. As you turn to leave the plaza, the buildings behind you begin to shimmer. Not disappear, but blur. They're still there. You just can't focus on them anymore. Before you step fully out of the loop, you glance back. The cartographer's robes shift again. This time, the pattern is you, walking forward, fading gently, one footstep at a time. You choose a shelf at random, and it adjusts its height to meet your hand. You open it slowly. The pages inside are warm and drowsy, covered in faint text that fades in and out depending on how hard you try to read it. So you stop trying, and that's when the story arrives, not in words, but in images behind your eyelids. You see yourself as a child again, not exactly you, but a version of you who lives in a house where every floorboard hums a different lullaby. That version climbs into a closet and finds a spiral staircase leading downward, and downward into a room where a fox is shelving glass acorns by candlelight. You close the book and feel it give a contented sigh, as if your dream added to its story. A tiny plaque on the spine reads, Volume 438, Visitors with Soft Hands. You laugh, a small underwater laugh. Further down the shelf, a much larger book grumbles softly. It's leather-bound and slightly mossy, like it resents being awakened. You hesitate, then open it. This one is entirely blank, except for one phrase. This book only contains the stories you've tried to forget. It's heavier than the others. Not physically, but emotionally. You're not sure you want to read it. So you gently close it, and it does not object. In the corner of the library, a section floats higher than the rest, lit by a cluster of sleepy lanternfish tethered to the ceiling by silk threads. A soft breeze nudges you in that direction, not wind exactly, but suggestion. As you rise, there are no stairs, only a polite elevator made entirely of sound. You spot a sleeping librarian. They're curled up on a pile of unshelved books wearing a nightcap stitched with constellations that haven't been named yet. Their snoring is rhythmic, like a gentle metronome. Next to them, a note reads, "Please return dreams to the appropriate shelf. Thank you. You reach the top level. The books here don't look like books. One resembles a jellyfish. Another is a cube of soft moss that hums quietly. A third is a spinning globe of ink that rearranges itself into different continents depending on where you're standing. You touch the globe and suddenly you're standing on a sandy rooftop, watching two suns set over a field of enormous flowers. They hum to each other in a language that feels suspiciously like old lullabies you've long since forgotten. A dragon-shaped cloud floats by. You wave. It nods back. You close your eyes, and the vision dissolves. When you open them, a whispery book flutters beside you. It opens itself, revealing a short poem written entirely in questions. What is the shape of a forgotten tune? Can a city remember you back? What color is the sigh between waking and sleep? You don't know the answers. You suspect no one does. The book seems pleased by this and folds itself into a paper crane, which promptly flies off to nest in a chandelier made of rain. There's a mainstream fact you half remember now, somewhere in the field of psychology. Humans often dream of libraries during periods of internal reorganization. Our brains use the image of the archive to sort, shelve, or quietly discard pieces of ourselves we're not ready to process. You wonder if this library is doing the same. Then you see it, a door tucked between two shelves labeled in glowing ink. Reading room for when you are ready. You pause. Behind it, the faint sound of waves and something else. Music, or just your own pulse? You press your hand to the door. It doesn't open. Instead, it listens. You realize the door isn't asking to be opened, it's asking to be remembered. So you take a slow breath and recall a bedtime story you heard as a child. One that ended without an ending, one you always wanted to finish. You whisper the first line of it, and the door opens like a sigh. Inside, the room is smaller than expected, just a chair, a candle, and a single book on a pedestal. You sit. The book opens itself. Inside is this. The journey you've been taking. Everything from the moment you first misremembered the Coral City's name to the library you're in now, you are reading the story of yourself. And just before you can reach the final page, the candle flickers. You look up. The librarian stands in the doorway, now awake, now smiling gently. "Don't worry," they say. The last chapter writes itself. You nod, close the book, and the door dissolves behind you. You are once again inside the library's gentle current, floating downward through dreams that don't belong to anyone and stories that remember themselves. You drift gently out of the library's breath-warmed air, following a corridor made entirely of overlapping echoes. Not your echoes, others. Snippets of quiet laughter, a footstep muffled in velvet, a page turned decades ago. The walls here don't reflect sound so much as cradle it. And just like that, without quite meaning to, you find yourself in a stairwell carved from petrified coral. The steps are too wide to be practical and too soft to be natural. They seem to adjust themselves as you walk, as if remembering the shape of your gait from a dream you haven't had yet. Each step downward feels less like descent and more like unraveling. You're not sure what's being unspooled, your memory, the city, time. You keep walking anyway because curiosity is a current stronger than gravity. At the bottom, a faint glow pulses from beneath a veil of mist. You lift it, expecting perhaps another chamber, another twist. But no, it is another city, a second coral city, resting like a reflection that no longer waits for the surface. The architecture is stranger here, older, less decorative, more instinctual, like it was dreamed by something ancient and uncertain how buildings should work. Houses are shaped like shells, but from species no one's catalogued. Bridges loop through themselves. Lampposts emit soft light, not from bulbs, but from blossoms that open only when you stop looking directly at them. You take a slow step forward. Your foot sinks slightly into sand, and the entire city seems to breathe. Here, the water is thicker, not denser, but emotionally thicker. Every movement carries a weight of memory you can't quite identify. You are not alone. Shapes move behind curtains. Footsteps echo ahead of you without bodies. And all around there's a sense of welcome, not like a party, but like a dream that's been waiting for you to fall into it. On one corner stands a statue made of bronze and salt. It depicts a person halfway through turning into coral. Their face is peaceful, as if they finally understood something impossible just before the transformation began. A plaque at its base reads, "To those who remembered too clearly." You trace a finger along the inscription. The metal feels warm, though it shouldn't. You get the feeling that remembering too well in this city is like turning on a light underwater. Useful, but dangerous. This city, this second coral city, feels like the result of remembering too deeply, not aloud perhaps, but with too much precision. The first city vanishes when remembered. This one accumulates. A fringe theory floats through your mind, one you once overheard in a museum gift shop. It claimed that every forgotten place creates a shadow of itself, a mirror formed from the weight of absence. These shadows, it said, become dens of memory sediment, fragments too stubborn to fade, too quiet to be heard. Perhaps this is one of them. The coral city above the waves vanishes with spoken memory. The one beneath the sea disappears when you forget, but this one, beneath both, exists because of the things you're trying not to forget, but haven't let go of either. You walk toward a garden that seems to float mid-air, suspended by strands of sea silk. Inside are statues that change position when you blink. Not creepily, more like they're stretching or trying on better poses. One is holding a key. You reach out. The statue's hand opens slightly and you take the key without resistance. It's warm, again, inexplicably so, and shaped like a spiral. Then, without warning, a door appears behind you, not dramatically, just there, as if it had always existed and was waiting for the exact moment you'd forget you needed one. It's made of driftwood and pearl inlay. A sign above it reads, "Exit," or something like it. You glance back. The second city hums behind you, content. Not quite real, not quite gone. You open the door. Inside is a room. One chair, one window, one sleeping fox on a rug shaped like a question mark. You sit. The fox opens one eye lazily, then closes it again, unconcerned. Outside the window, you see all three coral cities layered like tracing paper. The one that vanishes, the one that remembers, and the one that waits. A map unfolds across your lap, unasked. It shows all three. There's a line drawn between them, a loop, a circle. It's labeled for travelers who drift between the known and the not quite. A soft breeze moves through the room, though there is no wind underwater. You realize the room isn't part of any city. It's a resting place between them, a place for your mind to breathe before deciding what kind of remembering it wants to do next. You lean back in the chair. The fox begins to snore. It sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. You sit for a long time with the fox's rhythmic breathing and the quiet ticking of some invisible clock. The room seems to swell and contract around you, not like a lung, but like an idea testing its boundaries. The window shows nothing now, just darkness, speckled with what might be stars or bioluminescent thought fragments. You run your fingers over the spiral key still in your hand. Its shape tugs something loose in your mind, a word or maybe the shape of a word. Not in any language, you know. Maybe not in any language that has ever existed. But still it's familiar, like a name you almost said once in a dream before you woke up. You stand. The fox grumbles softly, rolls over, and mutters something unintelligible in its sleep. Possibly a pun, possibly just gas. The room dissolves gently around you like sugar in warm tea. The chair, the rug, the sense of linear time, gone. And you are walking again, or maybe floating. The passage ahead isn't lit, but it isn't dark either. It exists in the soft, in-between grey of memories that never quite settled. As you move forward, that half-remembered word returns. It scratches at the back of your awareness, curious but not urgent. You pass through another arch, this one made of translucent bone, polished by centuries of gentle water. Above it, inscribed in curling script that shifts if you stare too long, is a phrase. Here lies the name that undid the map. You pause, that seems important. Inside is a chamber unlike the rest. No coral, no light, no books, just echoes. And in the center, a pedestal, not grand, not ornate, just smooth white stone, humming faintly with thought. And on that pedestal, nothing, except an absence. A noticeable hollow where something ought to be. Not a physical object, but a concept. A shape that your mind tries and fails to fill. This is the name. Or more precisely, the absence of it. You feel it trying to take form in your mind. Every time it nearly does, your thoughts skid sideways into nonsense, into lullabies, into memories of standing barefoot in grass you've never touched. You recall a scholarly theory, mainstream but obscure, that some ancient names were designed not to be remembered, but to be forgotten precisely, carefully, as if the forgetting itself was a ritual, a protection, a lock. One quirky detail from that theory sticks with you, that in some long-lost script, vowels were optional, but forgiveness was mandatory. You smile. You don't know why. You step closer to the pedestal. Your mouth forms shapes that aren't sounds. The key in your hand pulses faintly, almost a heartbeat. Or maybe your own, echoed. You feel the name reaching for you as much as you reach for it. And then you almost say it, just a breath away. You could let it fall from your tongue like water. You want to. But something, some strange instinct, maybe kindness, stops you. Because you remember now, every time someone remembers the name, the coral city vanishes. And maybe that's not a punishment. Maybe it's a kindness. Maybe the city vanishes, not to avoid being known, but to rest, to dream, uninterrupted. So, you swallow the name, you keep it unspoken. Not because you're afraid, but because some stories are more beautiful when they're unfinished. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be cradled. Behind you, a soft sound, a sort of chime or exhale. You turn. The city is reassembling itself. Not quickly. Not showily. Just patiently. Building again from coral and memory, from the soft hum of tides and forgotten conversations. The first city, sleek and shimmering, slides back into existence. The second city, layered in memory, dense with unspoken questions, glows faintly, watching from below. And the third? The shadow city, the dreaming city, lingers just out of sight, waiting for someone else to lose their way in just the right shape. The key in your hand melts gently into sand. The pedestal folds inward, satisfied. And the name? It curls into your chest like a sleepy cat and disappears. You turn to leave, unsure of where you're going, but certain you're not lost. Because now the coral city will remember you softly, the way cities remember travelers who didn't ask for directions, but left behind laughter in the stone. You ascend. Through library and garden, stair and story, until the sea becomes thinner, then lighter, then imagined. You breach the surface not with splash or ceremony, but with a sigh. A foghorn moans in the distance, whether from ship or whale or something stranger, you don't know. But it feels like a goodbye, or maybe a see you next time. The sky is velvet now, star-pricked and soft. The air smells faintly of salt and lavender. And you? You lie back on a shore that may or may not be real, watching the stars rearrange themselves into constellations that spell nothing in particular but still feel like home. Somewhere between the rising tide and the falling of your eyelids, you remember a story you never actually heard. It arrives fully formed, like a gift left in your coat pocket by time itself. A tale about a cartographer, one with wind-blown hair, a jacket that always had at least one pocket full of sand, and a habit of asking strange questions at stranger hours. This cartographer, let's call them Alien, once tried to chart the Coral City. Not just its streets or walls, but its disappearances, the when, the where, the why, and the what's left behind. Of course, this wasn't a popular career move. Most people prefer maps that show places, but Elian was far more interested in the places that weren't there anymore. They believed that absence could be mapped just as clearly as presence, if only you asked the right sort of questions. So Elian travelled, not in the usual way, not with boats or compasses, but with a lantern that only lit up near forgotten things, and with notebooks full of ink that faded as soon as it dried, forcing them to write only what was absolutely necessary. They wandered coastlines where locals left food on the rocks for guests who never arrived. They sketched tidal patterns shaped like letters no one could read. They listened to dreams people had about staircases that led down instead of up, and doors that refused to open unless you were humming in your sleep. It was in one of these dreams, someone else's, but vivid nonetheless, that Elian first glimpsed the Coral City. Only it wasn't called that then. It had no name, just an impression, like the taste of cold metal or the memory of a lullaby with no melody. And so Elian drew it, or at least drew the space around it. The outline of an absence. A city-shaped hole surrounded by whispers and salt. A mainstream historian might have dismissed the work, and in fact, many did. But in fringe circles, Elian became quietly famous, especially for one map in particular, a chart titled simply Vanishing Vectors. It didn't show geography, it showed timing, patterns in when the Coral City disappeared, odd lunar alignments, fluctuations in sea temperature, the emotional state of a particular librarian in Tunisia who seemed, somehow, connected to the whole phenomenon. Scholars still debate that last point. No one could ever track down the librarian. Some think they never existed. Others believe the librarian was the Coral City in human form, walking around to see how the rest of the world worked. Elian didn't care what people thought. They only cared that the city kept vanishing, and reappearing, and vanishing again. The cartographer's goal was never to pin it down, but to create a kind of respectful choreography. To know when to look away, when to hum quietly, when to forget just enough for the city to feel safe. Their final map, unfinished but still haunting, was found tucked inside a bottle made of compressed fog and quartz. The paper inside contained only a single spiral, the same shape as the key you once held. You imagine Elian now sitting on a rock somewhere, staring into a tide pool that reflects stars from constellations that don't exist anymore. Maybe they're still charting, or maybe they've joined the city. Folded into coral and memory, humming softly in a library made of shells and echo. You lie back, feeling the shape of the spiral under your ribs, pulsing like a second heartbeat. One more thing, a fact that seems important now, though you can't explain why. In some cultures, especially in coastal Indonesia and parts of the South Pacific, there's a myth of islands that only appear when forgotten. Not when ignored, mind you, but when genuinely let go of. They're called Pulau Lupa, the islands of forgetting. Sailors speak of brushing past them by accident, catching a scent of sandalwood and tide, then forgetting they'd been there at all. Perhaps the Coral City is one of them. Perhaps Elian was trying to connect them all. To draw a map of forgetting so precise that even forgetting itself could be navigated. You smile. The stars overhead flicker, rearranging slightly. One now looks like a lantern, another like a fox. The wind picks up just enough to muss your hair. The sea, always patient, curls a little closer. The soft return to waking shores. The tide has inched up to your toes, warm now, like bathwater steeped with dreams. Each wave laps with the gentlest intent, as if the ocean is checking in, not to carry you away, just to see if you're still here. You are. But maybe not for long. The stars begin to dim, not in that urgent pre-dawn way, but like candles being snuffed after a long, cozy evening. Even constellations need their sleep. You sit up slowly, sand falling from your sleeves in a delicate hush. Somewhere behind your eyes, the Coral City still shimmers, threefold, layered, elusive. You don't try to pin it down. You don't reach for the name. Because you've learned now, some things want to be visited, not owned. Some stories want to be remembered sideways, in soft glances and almost dreams. You rise and follow the edge of the surf, not really walking toward anything, just moving because the world is still turning, and it's nice to turn with it. As you walk, you start to notice little things placed along the shore. Not shells or driftwood, but souvenirs from your journey. A single page from Elian's vanishing notebook, still faintly inked with a line that reads, "When the coral breathes, forget your name." A piece of staircase carved from salt, dry to the touch despite the sea spray. A cluster of fox prints that loop around once, then vanish into nothing. No sign of where they began, no sign of where they end. And something else, hovering just at the edge of your attention. A soft tune, whistled, sung, played by wind through reeds. You hum along, instinctively. It's the sort of tune that doesn't stick in your mind later, but feels lovely in the moment. Like a dream you don't need to tell anyone about to know it mattered. A mainstream neurological study you once half read, while procrastinating, Laundry noted that dreams involving water, stairs, and unreadable text tend to signal mental integration. The brain's way of tucking the day's chaos into calm little drawers. You hope that's true. You feel like a very well-organized drawer right now. You step around a small sand castle, shaped unmistakably, like the second layer of the Coral City. Who built it? You didn't notice anyone else. Maybe it built itself. Maybe cities sometimes leave little blueprints behind like seashells. Further ahead, the horizon ripples. Not from heat, but from choice. You could keep going, walk right into that shimmer, and vanish back into the story. Or you could sit here a while longer, letting the last fragments of dreams settle in your chest like sea glass. Either option is fine. The city's not gone, not really, just elsewhere. And you know now how to find it again. You don't need coordinates, you just need to forget its name. And remember its feeling. Somewhere in your pocket is something smooth. You reach in. It's the key again, only now it's made of light. You toss it gently into the waves. It hovers for a second, then dissolves into laughter. No splash, no sound, just gone. Above you, the sky lightens by a single shade. Not morning yet, just the whisper of it. You feel heavy in the best possible way, like you're anchored, not stuck, tethered to a story that doesn't need an ending. The sea hums a lullaby, the sand warms your souls, and the wind, always curious, scoops up your leftover thoughts and carries them gently out to sea. Just in case the Coral City ever wants to read them. And now, as we drift toward the edges of wakefulness, you can let go of the map completely. There's nothing more to follow, No more stairs to descend, no more names to almost remember. Just breathe, and tide, and quiet curiosity. Let your body feel the weight of stillness now. Your shoulders a little softer, your jaw unclenched, your hands resting in a position they chose without asking you. The coral city isn't behind you or ahead of you. It's folded gently into your chest, pulsing with the quiet rhythm of all the mysteries you didn't need to solve tonight. Maybe tomorrow you'll think of spiral keys and vanishing cities and maps that chart the silence. Maybe not. Either way, the story has done what it came here to do. It walked beside you for a while, and now it's resting too. So wherever you are, whether you're curled under a blanket, lying in a hammock, or slowly sinking into a dream you'll only half remember by morning, you're safe. You're exactly where you need to be. And maybe, just maybe, as you fall asleep, you'll hear a sleepy fox laugh in its sleep, or see the hint of a staircase reflected in a puddle, or hum a tune with no melody. It doesn't need to make sense, it only needs to feel soft. So close your eyes, breathe in like the tide, breathe out like forgetting, and let the coral city vanish once more.